and I will mention to everyone it's recorded. So I will admit everyone in. Here we go. Good luck.
Please wait, the meeting host will let you in soon.
And everyone is connecting to audio. We'll give that a minute. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you are in the world. Welcome. Welcome to Unlocking Evidence. This is brought to you by DNV, which is one of our Norcross partners and dear friends. We will be starting right away. As you notice, I have everyone on mute. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone will continue to be on mute, but by all means, while our guests are presenting, please feel free to use the chat, which we will be paying close attention to. Or if you're not comfortable with the chat, there's at the bottom of your Zoom, there's a little icon where you can raise your hand. And you can see I've just done that here. We'll be paying close attention to that. In case there are any questions, and we'll document everything. And once the presentation is finished, we'll open up the floor. So please bring your questions, and we look forward to a really, really good discussion. Finally, just a little bit of an introduction around unlocking evidence. Today's topic is about what we can learn about data management practices from basic as well as to some more advanced practices. And our partners, as I mentioned earlier, DNV, which is a Norcross partner, will be sharing some best practices and some examples from some of the work that they do, and linking it, of course, to context within RCRC. So I have two people I'd like to introduce. And the first one is Karl Pedersen. Karl is a principal specialist over at DNV. Hello, Karl. As well as Michael Kroon. Michael Kroon is a part of the IFRC. He has a glorious title of Global IT Planning and Project Management Business Consultant. So welcome, Karl. Welcome, Michael. And great to have you here, Karl. Michael, I will turn everything over to you, and we look forward to a great session.
Okay, thank you. Let's get started. Let's see if we can share the screen. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Is this working? Right. Was I successful?
You were. Looks great.
Excellent. Good. Okay. Let's just shoot then. Yeah. Good. Okay. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for setting time aside for me to go through this presentation. So this is very interesting. The title is Unlocking Evidence, and I think we'll understand afterwards or later on in the presentation why we're actually calling it that. Thanks for George for the very good title, by the way. I can't claim that. I can't claim that mine. Okay. As George said, we are DNV. We are a company based in Norway who work with assurance and risk management. What do I mean by that? Well, we assure things. We assure that a ship is fit to sail. We assure that a medical device is safe to use. We assure that parts of the electric transmission grid are safe to use, and things like that. So we run assurance and we run risk management on things. So if something if you're working in a dangerous environment, what are the risks to work in that environment? We've been going for about just over 150 years, and based in Norway and offices around the world. We work a lot with digital transformation, and the unit I work with, we work a lot with data management and data quality. And often it's with companies that are going through a digital transformation, which is exactly what the Red Cross is doing. So through the Norwegian Red Cross, or Norcross, we've then been collaborating with the Red Cross for two and a half years now. So working with the Norwegian Red Cross, working with IFRC in Geneva, working with 510 Netherlands, and many others as well. So it's been a really interesting project for us. And we just want to now go through and talk a bit about data management, but in the context of digital transformation. So that's the backdrop. Digital transformation. You as an organization are going through a transformation. It's a long journey. It's not a project. It won't be finished next year. But it's a transformation that we've been through as a company. So we've been working and helping and providing advice around this. And why do we do digital transformation? It helps us to leverage new technologies, create new opportunities, optimize activities. It's often a big change in terms of how we do things, so the culture is a big part of it. And one big part of it is we often, as companies, move to become more data-driven. So we're evidence-based. So we're not just sticking our fingers up in the air and thinking, okay, yeah, that's the right answer. We're actually going and looking at our data and using that to make decisions. So that's a very important part of it. So what we often say is if you're going through a digital transformation, data is a big enabler. We're becoming more dependent on our data, and that data is used to make decisions. So we have to trust our decisions, and hence the data, which is the input to make the decisions, has to be of good quality. In terms of, we call this this presentation unlocking evidence. Evidence is the available body of facts, information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid, from the Oxford English Dictionary. And then it's the trust part of things. It's this information or this data. We have to be able to trust that. So when we can trust that, we know that's good quality, then we unlock the evidence, and we can use that and base our decisions on it. So that's where our title comes from. Okay, so in terms of being data driven, you have to be able to trust your data. This is a typical flow with data that let's have a look. If I see if I have a nice little laser pointer on the screen here. We have our data coming into systems. We have data in our company, comes in our systems. You have data that go into your systems, and you want to, at the end of the day, use that data to make a decision. But you have to make sure that that data is fit for use before you analyze that data and then make the decision. So if we look at this magic animation, we have to be able to trust this part of it. We have to ensure that the data is fit for use. We trust that. We can then trust our analysis, and then trust the decisions that analysis allows us to do. And the important thing here is, if we don't have good data quality, there's no way we're going to be able to trust what's going on in this box here. How do we get good data quality? Well, luckily we've got very good things that we can do, and what we're going to talk about a lot here is data management. So the framework around your data. So if you've got to get good data management in place, then you are in a better place to ensure that you have good data quality. So that's the focus here. I've got two examples. They are from the industries that we as a company work in, and we'll come back to the relevance later on towards the end of the presentation. Okay, so we work a lot, I mentioned, with shipping. We go out and survey and spec ships to make sure they are fit to travel the oceans and deliver our goods around the world, or whatever they do. In the same way that you maybe take your car in to get tested on a yearly vehicle examinations. And what's really important for us, and particularly our customers, is that this does not happen. So this was a few years ago outside India. a container vessel which broke into. And that's really not a good day for anyone, so we need to avoid that happening. And what we traditionally do is we send surveyors out in the field, and they check these vessels maybe every 1 to 5 years to check that they are fit to travel the oceans. Another example, we also want to avoid this example of 13 years ago, a vessel that broke into two and ended up on the beach, as we can see, and we want to avoid that. So how do we do that? What we do is we analyze data to calculate the stress in a ship's hull. So we get data from the vessels. These vessels have lots of sensors on them, and that data is then sent to us, and then we can analyze the data. And those sensors check how much the hull is stressing, how much it's stretching, for example. And over a period of time, we then get a history of the stress that vessel has undergone. And it's very important that data that comes in gives us good information. So we have to be able to trust the data. And if a vessel, for example, is traveling in the North Sea a lot, there's lots of waves there, and then that causes a lot of problems with stress in ships' hulls. Whereas maybe if it's in the inland canal, there's not as much issue. So having good data to do analysis is very important in this. So quality of the results from the analysis is important, because we make business decisions on that. Maybe we make a decision to say that that ship cannot sail, or maybe we have to do an extra inspection on a particular part of that vessel. So it's those decisions that are made based on analysis are really important. And good quality data is required as input. We have to be able to trust the data that goes into that. So is the data quality sufficient? Do you trust the data that's coming from the sensors on these vessels? And how do you ensure your data are fit for use? And that is where we come in with data management. What data management does is provide a framework for ensuring good quality data. So we'll come back to that framework later on after I've gone through the second example that we have. Okay. The other example, it's kind of very different, but it's within artificial intelligence. I'm certainly no expert on this, but I think it's a nice example, because we hear a lot about artificial intelligence in the media. Everyone wants to do something with it or use it in their processes. But often we see there's not necessarily an acceptance of artificial intelligence. We see there's a lot of issues going on. The technology is not widely understood. There's been a lot of things in the media recently about artificial intelligence not doing the right thing, not doing what we're expecting. It's often used nowadays to make decisions on people getting a loan or even getting benefits in a particular company, social benefits, for example, and obviously used for self-driving cars, for example, and so on. And I'm not sure it's necessarily a backlash, but there's maybe a bit of push against it. Is it the right way to go? Maybe we're stepping back a bit and thinking a bit more carefully about how important, how big a part of this, our society is going to take. And the technology is not widely understood. There's often a poor experience, which I mentioned those examples there, and you often see them in the media. And one important thing with artificial intelligence, it uses large amounts of data. There's a lot of data that's going to these models that they make the decisions, which is the part of artificial intelligence. And often data protection is a concern with that data. There's often examples of data being used in these artificial intelligence models, and maybe they haven't got enough, a good overview of it. For example, in health, there's a good example with the IBM Watson, where they were looking at cancer patients, and the training of that artificial intelligence system was based on only a small number of patients, and it turns out they were hypothetical cancer patients, so it wasn't making good decisions on that. So you really have to trust the data that goes into these models. However, maybe there's an increased acceptance of artificial intelligence due to the pandemic we're in at the moment. We've looked at the health sector, for example. We'll see the robots are becoming more important. They can go around and do disinfection in areas. That's become quite new, maybe more accepted than it was before the pandemic. Similarly, we've seen supplies and COVID tests and so on being used and delivered by drones or UAVs, or whatever you care to call them, and they're obviously a good part of that. They have artificial intelligence as a base for them to be able to get from A to B and deliver these tests to hospitals, to remote areas, and so on. And we've certainly seen examples of that being done in Africa. There's examples of that being done in Scotland and in other parts of the world. And finally, example of Boston Robotics using their robot, their legged robot, and actually helping frontline staff in COVID situations to interview and register patients coming in. So there's a little less human contact, which has been important during the pandemic. So maybe these things are sort of making AI a bit more acceptable, quite possibly. However, we have to be able to trust these artificial intelligence solutions, and they need good data quality in the same way as a shipping example earlier on. Doctors that are using these systems, they have to be able to trust the software, and to be able to trust that software, they have to have good, accurate data that they can trust within that. And also in artificial intelligence, often you get a large set of data, which is called a training data, which is how you train your models. And it's very important that the quality of that data is good. It's not necessarily quantity is important, but it has to be data that's representative of whatever has to be solved to avoid bias. And data quality is very important for that. So understanding your data, it's not just necessarily that big data is good, put lots of big data in, it will solve the problem. You actually have to have good quality data. And yet again, the magic bullet, data management, it provides a framework for ensuring good quality data, also in this artificial intelligence example. Okay. We often work with something called the Dharma DM book. It's a North American organization who produce a good guide and training and so on around data management. And this is a quote from their most recent book. And they say that the primary driver for data management is to enable organizations to get value from their data assets, just as effective management of financial and physical assets enables organizations to get value from those data, from those assets. So so we've been managing things a long time. We've been managing assets. We've been managing buildings. We've been managing vehicle pools. We've been managing equipment that, for example, the Red Cross use out in the field. And obviously they've been managing assets, but we also have to manage the data as well. That's very important. And there's a quote there from the Harvard Business Review. It's probably, it's 4 years old now, but it's still just as relevant. Looking at the cost of bad data to the US. And so 4 years ago, they estimated that it was a $3 trillion per year dollar. That's the cost of using bad data. And that's just one country, and then obviously an estimate. And that comes from Thomas Redmond, who's a bit of a thought leader in this area. Okay, so I've talked about shipping, I've talked about artificial intelligence, and maybe you think, I can quite understand, maybe feel this is a bit sort of separate from what we do in the Red Cross, but I think often the stuff we do around data quality and data management, we think the problems we have in our expert areas or domain areas, whether it's shipping or health, we think that they're very special. But I think really a lot of the problems that you will come across in the Red Cross in terms of having good quality data, in managing that data well, they're very similar to lots of different areas. So I think really we're actually more similar than we think. So I think that the things I'm talking about is very relevant for yourselves. And that's certainly what we found as we've gone through and worked with you for the past 2 or 3 years. Okay, so humanitarian sector, the same example I showed earlier on. But here you exactly are the same as the examples I showed. You have data coming in, you have to be able to manage that data to ensure you have the good data quality, and then your data is fit for use. You can then use that data in analysis and then make good decisions on it. So it's just as important for yourselves. You've maybe got stores of equipment around the world, you've got buildings, you've got vehicles, and you will want lots of data on those assets to be able to manage them. You have to ensure where you have buildings, you have to ensure where you have your supplies, you have to know where you are having incidents that you have to work with, and you have to be able to trust the data that's used in those decision tools. So I feel it's very relevant for the work you do. And we'll have a good chat later on, and Mike will come up with some good examples where exactly these things come up within the Red Cross. So I've talked a bit about data management and a framework for data management. And we feel that data management really is the foundation for organizing your data effectively. And there's lots of different models you can use, or different frameworks you can use. I'm showing the one that we use internally in our organization, but it's very similar. It's also based or inspired by the Dharma that I mentioned earlier on. You also see these from lots of other big companies, also CMMI, who work a lot of software and data. They also have a similar model. So they're very common and very similar. And if I just go through these 8 areas here, when you're managing data, when you've got data management organization, you have to have governance. So you have to have people at the top that say, maybe a CEO, that person wants good data for their business to work correctly. They know that quality of the data is important. So then they will set a governance framework and say, okay, I want good data. Go away and do it, implement data management, here's some resources, here's some money, here's what we want to achieve, and then go away and do that. So that's a kind of the top level commitment to ensure that you actually do that. And that's very important to be in place. Often in terms of data management, we have super people maybe working away in some quiet corner with data management in their area, and they do really good work. But it's not until we get a more of a standardized approach across the organization where we actually get the value. So we need all those super people in the cellars or in the dark corners to come up, have a overall governance, overall data management framework, so we're all doing things in the same way. So build on our existing knowledge and experience within the organization. To do good data management, we need an organization, we need people. We need people that know something about data management, they know about data quality. They have to have it as part of their job description, and they have to have the funding to be able to do that. In terms of data management, you need processes. If you find a data quality issue, for example, you want a process to find out how to solve that data quality issue. You actually want to go down to the root cause and find out why that data is poor quality. There's no point just extracting data from a central database and then updating the wrong data in your Excel sheet. You really need to go back to the single source of the data and ensure that that data is good quality. So having processes around that is very important. Yeah, those processes have to be efficient. You have to actually be picking up the right things. That's very important. And in terms of metrics, we have to be able to measure for these things and maybe display them on the dashboard to see, are we actually picking up the data quality issues that we find? Are people aware of them? And is something actually getting done about that? Are we improving over time? And if our data quality improves over time, then we know that our decisions are better over time as well. Requirement definition, you actually have to, it's very important to know what your requirements are good, what do you mean by good data quality? So defining what you require from your data is a very important part of that. And that feeds into all these metrics and dimensions as well. And in terms of architecture tools and technologies, you actually need some IT stuff to do this. You need maybe some software to create a dashboard. You maybe need some tools to check for data quality. You maybe need some systems for processes to be set up in as well. And finally, in terms of data standards, we have to have data standards to ensure that we're doing things the same way. For example, when we are adding codes into a database, that we actually using the same codes in different parts of the organization. So maybe we have incidents that happen, for example, or particular incidents that you are involved in, and that those are coded in the database in the same way. You use the same standards. That means data can actually be put together later on. And also in terms of actually sharing data between organizations. The Red Cross is a very distributed organization, so it's very important that you have standards between all the different organizations so they can share data in the right way. It's not necessarily an issue having lots of different data in different places, but they have to be able to talk to each other. Interoperability has to be important, and that's where standards often come in. Very important. Okay, just looking at the time, I'm probably going to get this done on time, on top of the hour, so fingers crossed. We often talk about the data life cycle in data. Data has a history or has a life. It's born somewhere, it's created somewhere. That data is used in different processes, it's stored, and then maybe later on it's archived or even deleted. So in terms of the data life cycle, it's important to consider that data brings value at different points in this life cycle. So what we often, the example here is data is created at a particular time and point, and at that particular time, it's maybe not that valuable to the business, and it's maybe not later on during the life of that data that it actually becomes useful. It's useful to your organization. I went to a talk yesterday, and part of this Data and Digital Week by the American Red Cross, and they talked about being more data driven and getting historical data on, if I remember, it was hurricane data, and then that data was stored in a database, and then they had information on shelters and things like that, and there's an investment in collecting that data, so they're actually collecting the data all along here. It's actually investment. They have to spend money storing that data, archiving that data, and also making sure that data is up to date. But there's not actually much value to not much visible value to the business at that particular time. It's not until suddenly that maybe there's an event here, there's a hurricane or there's a disaster, and then that data becomes very important. It's very valuable. So the point here is that you have to create data today that brings value to your business tomorrow. So there's no point in just suddenly having a project to collect data because you need it there and then. You have to have more of a long-term focus and collect the right data, invest in that data. Even though it costs a bit, you'll get the value later on if you have good data, and obviously good data quality. Okay, so in terms of summary, I think an integral part of digital transformation is that data is valuable, it's an asset, and you have to treat or manage it in that way as well. So at the moment you're going through a big digital transformation, you've got the strategy 2030, where digital transformation is one of those important transformations, and it supports a lot of the other ones as well. So it's important that you actually treat data as an asset, and I know you do, and there's really good examples of that, and doing that across the organization is important. And to ensure that you have good data quality, you need data management. You have to design for data quality and manage your data to meet your business needs. There's lots of, I've called this slide, where do we start? you started many years ago. You do a lot of really good work at the moment, so that's great to see. But if you are just starting out, or some parts of the organisation, or you want some inspiration or ideas, using that Dharma DM book is a good thing to look at. The data management body of knowledge. That's kind of our Bible. It's a bit too big. I used to have it under my screen, but to raise my screen, I'm quite tall because it's a real thick book, but it's actually worth opening as well and reading. There's a lot of good stuff in there. And finally, you're doing a lot of good work in the digital transformation assessment, which the IFRC have created. And I know a lot of you are involved in that. And I think that's also a very good start, because a good bit of that is also looking at your data, ensuring you're managing your data correctly and making it available for evidence-based decision making. Okay, I think top of the hour. And that was my last slide. Okay.
Well, thanks so much, Karl. This is Heather Leeson speaking. I'm just very glad to have you here today to share. When it comes to the work around data literacy and digital transformation, one of the top things that people have asked for is to talk what some of their roadblocks are around, or what is data management, or how can I have better data management, or can you support it? So it really is important. When it comes to the examples you share around shipping, we are saving lives, and data is people for the Red Cross Red Crescent. And you've been on that journey as our partner, teaching us from your standards and your examples. So we're very much thankful for that. It seems to me that in all of your national societies around the world, there are many examples of partners who might be able to share their skills, like Karl and his team, Karl John and Per and their team in DNV have helped us. And so we're very glad that they've been helping us on the digital transformation journey. And so with that, I do want to hand over to Michael Kroon, who's with our IT department, as George rightfully mentioned, because I think you have some thoughts and reflections around data management and what you've learned as well. And just don't forget, as George said, there's questions in the chat, and just thanks, Karl.
Hi, thanks Heather. Thanks Karl John. Wonderful presentation, wonderful intro there. So yeah, I want to tell you a little bit about data management at the digitalization and IT department of the Secretariat, IFRC Secretariat in Geneva. So the IFRC data management is basically, it's a very fragmented affair, and it's driven by multiple stakeholders. There's the divisions that are sometimes accused of being a little bit siloed. There's obviously the back office support functions, legal, HR, IT. You see a lot of short-termism in that. A lot of data is discarded after programs and projects that could in fact provide a lot of useful knowledge and learning for the organization. Is basically no longer looked at. And the current situation, frankly, leaves the Secretariat dealing with a high degree of inaccurate and disparate data that gives us really a number of challenges as the ITD department. So I want to go a little bit through these. Now, the generic challenge is, of course, the vast number of users. At least we think there are a lot. There are thousands of users, and we're not helping ourselves with catering to this diverse group in terms of the number of systems and applications that we have. We have well over 100, and all those, as you can guess, consume and produce data, and it's a little bit a challenge in itself, that volume. Then, as I said before, and that fragmented nature of the data is associated with many users doing their own thing, basically building their own system, doing their own ad hoc solution to data management and storage, so it's all over the place. And the numerous collection channels, so where does all the data come from, where does it go to, and the lack of visibility of that make good data management an important but a little bit elusive goal at the moment. So, for example, when asked recently by the Digital Transformation Initiative to collect some pretty basic data about our IT activities, for us that would be a mega exercise. We have the information surely somewhere, but how to get it, how to pull it together in a meaningful way is proving quite an exercise. And that's our own shop, let alone that of our users that we know a lot less about, of course. There's another big challenge is the lack of ownership, which is very often just a passive affair. There's simply no owner for some data. which makes kind of addressing issues with it that much more difficult, because you need to talk to a lot of people that have different stakes in this data management affair. The other leg that we have, a rather big one, is the lack of a cross-organization consistent data Q&A process, the quality management process. As Karl John pointed out before, that is absolutely key. In history, there's been a number of big waves, which is now ending with the wave of artificial intelligence, that are really struggling. That these paradigm developments that should really change the world of IT and everything, make it better, but they're often stumbling over data quality. Data quality in terms of incompleteness, incorrectness, unstructuredness, meaning different things to different people, etc., all of the above. Another challenge is the level of resources for data management in our department, but in the organization as a whole, it's even bigger. We haven't even estimated what number of resources are needed. Also, what, albeit in an ineffective way, what level of resources we are already spending, and what waste in that spend of resources could be resolved by putting proper data management in people's job descriptions, making people responsible for data sets, etc. So the result of all this is, as an organization, but as our department definitely as well, we struggle to aggregate, manage, and create value from data, which to some extent is one of the major goals, of course, of handling data in the first place. So the other element I would like to talk about a bit is the reactive approach to data management. As a natural optimist, I like to think that many organizations, the IFRC has yet to fully understand the potential benefits of properly managed data. Now, a realist would probably say that the IFRC doesn't yet realize or feel that it has a problem with data management. And this means that we often, as IFRC, and again, as that digital transformation example highlighted earlier on, we take a very reactive approach to data management, or even just data gathering. It's a bit the here comes another survey people kind of approach, and we will often wait until there are specific issues that need fixing. Audits, for example, or very low usage of our intra/extranet FetNet. Which leads us to another thing, which is the driving the change towards a data culture. Now, I think we're at a pretty good junction at the moment. There's Strategy 2030 that provides a great opportunity for the IFRC to gather enough support to improve its data culture. And the first manifestations that are encouraging. I mean, the fact that the digital transformation made it to one of the 7 transformations to be made over the 10-year period. That is together with the fact that it's actively driven forward by a pretty large team, and we have a lot of noise about it here in Data and Digital Week as well. That's great. We're creating groundswell. We're putting questions in people's heads, and that will definitely be a big help for all the digitalization and technical work we need to do in the DIT department, for example. So we're very grateful for that. We now need to see, once we get the big stone rolling, whether we can change its course, and the IFRC will prove willing and will prove able to provide the means to incorporate knowledge and skills around data management across the organization. And that means also the resources, and resources means people, because let's not forget that data management is very much a culture and people thing. People need to be motivated and need to understand the benefits, need to keep that focus and hard work in, to keep data at the quality that we need it. And that is, that I think it's an art in itself. How do you get such a vast and diverse organization to realize and to make people change and embrace that kind of attitude and be willing to provide that level of work? That's the big question around this for me. as well as process, etc., and all the things that Karl John mentioned earlier. Now, to build a bit on that and on what Karl John was presenting, and to illustrate what data management may mean, I found a rather depressing job description of a data scientist. How will you spend your time as a data scientist? Well, the short of it is they'll be spending 90% of their time on data collecting, labeling, cleaning, organization, modeling, and mining, and only 9% on the more glamorous work of refining algorithms. So, speaking for myself, my level of competency, I would probably be spending 100% on labeling and cleaning. And all this is to say that we're working towards a lofty goal, but a lot of hard work will be needed to get there. So hence the need, if you want to focus an organization on that, to keep people motivated, also by understanding what's in it for them. That may be an altruistic thing that's in it for them, of course, as well. What are DITD doing on all this? Well, the following initiatives at the Secretariat will really help reduce redundant work, processes, tools, and data. Doing some basic foundational blocks like an enterprise resource planning, all-to-all optimization for the HR and finance department, where we're mopping up a lot of redundant stuff. We now have SharePoint as our common file management system, not just for the applications like ERP or our electronic record and document management system, but also all the Office 365, Word, Excel, etc., MS Teams, as well as people's OneDrive. So everything is ending up in one big box. That's obviously helps. So you know where to look, where all your that kind of data is sitting. We also want to make managing people's identities a lot easier. So we're working on a single sign-on, where, for example, if someone from the Norwegian Red Cross would want to join the IFRC for a spell there, they could just use their existing ID and password to get access to our systems, if we authorize them, of course. But that's a heck of a lot better than having to create new identities, etc. And it also gives you something like a single directory for the whole IFRC, the whole movement. Wouldn't that be great? You could just see where people sit in the organization and what they're doing. Maybe people want to share some about their expertise. Wouldn't that be a great tool? And it's just a bit of quality data sitting there in one repository. So that's we like to daydream a little bit about things like that. And then last but not least, we obviously need to eat our own dog food. Well, actually, we need to prepare the food first and then eat it, and start to learn to change. And that learn to change is one I nicked from another department here, the National Society Development, and I'll share a link to it. But it has some great wording about learning, being able to sense and collect data about your environment, our DITD environment in this case, and about the people that are using the application and service, and then see what that data teaches you about how you can improve your applications and services. So that virtuous cycle, and I think cyclical processes are very much part of this. There should always be a life cycle, etc., around anything we do. That will be invaluable. So yeah, we need to put those metrics in place and learn from whatever they're telling us. Now, in addition to these core activities, as I touched on a little bit before, I think the DITD and the Digital Transformation Initiative are in a delicate dance, finding out how to tango. But we're already stumbling across the dance floor and see how we can cooperate and align to make the required culture change happen. I mean, realizing the worth of all the data we hold, generate, and consume, and becoming more of a data producer to support our key activities is definitely part of that. So yeah, that really ends my reflections on data management at the DITD department. Thanks for listening so far, and happy to take your questions later on. Over to you, Heather.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Karl John, for your reflections. Now, we do have the chat open. I'm going to hand over to George, but if you do have questions, and there's only a small group of us here too, so just questions or comments around what's happening in terms of data management in your organization, or reflections on our speakers. One works in a company that focuses on energy and shipping and standards, and the other one, Michael, used to work in aerospace engineering. So getting our standards nerd power here. So over to George, and any questions and comments are most welcome. Over.
Thanks, Heather. We do actually have a sort of a comment in the chat, and I'll apologize in advance if I do not pronounce this person's name right. It's either Mongi or Monji, and there was a comment here, Monji, if you want to expand on that. That data management is when you collect data and store it and use it effectively. And it sounds like the experiences within the national societies is that this older or physical model of keeping, collecting, storing, scrubbing data doesn't feel that it's very efficient. So I would love to hear more from you on that and on your comment if you're willing to come off of mute. Possibly not. No problem. There was another sort of general question that Heather had.
Sorry, George, can I just quickly say something to that? Because I think it's, well, I think there's nobody going to disagree with this.
Sure.
We could phrase it another way. The natural optimist would say, well, we can make it better, right? I mean, there's benefit in doing it better. And yeah, just the use of wording of physical model, etc. That I get, you get the impression that people are thinking a bit about the whole architecture around this. So just out of interest, that there is thinking going on in the ITD, and I think in the broader organization as well, about how do we effectively and efficiently share data across the network. So using my nerd power, I will share a link to some interesting articles about data meshing, which you may find interesting, because there's some simple pictures in there on how that would work, how would we implement it in terms of organization, tools, processes that you may find interesting. Carl John actually sent a link to that this morning. I had come across it already, and I can only agree that it's a riveting read. But hey, you have to be a bit of a nerd for sure.
Please share it in the chat. That would be fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Maybe I'll pose a general question to the rest of the group. And it was something that Heather sort of provocated out there earlier. What does data management mean to others, to each of you? And what have your experiences been with data management in your national societies? If anyone wants to raise their hand through the icon or the emojis or in the chat, I would love to hear from anyone. We have a new message here. Great. Or you can obviously type in the chat. We do have a raised hand. Jurian, please. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you also Carl John and Michael for your presentations and pitching this important subject. I think for the whole notion of data being an important asset, I think that's clearly not all around in our family, across the board at the different levels in any of our organizations. So I think that is an important aspect. I mean, to really drive the subject and drive and create more energy to actually make people aware that the whole idea about collecting data is also already a very important part of our work. And we've seen it, I'm working with the Netherlands Red Cross, but we've seen that also in the COVID response, that multiple situations have been missed, or occasions have been missed, to actually use contact moments with clients, beneficiaries, whatever you want to call, to actually generate more data. And I think so. That's, I think, one very important part. And also I would like to emphasize the importance of the people, the process, but particularly the people, culture, attitude thing. I mean, we've been spending 4 years already on the international project management system, you could say. I mean, but it basically is a way to really get a total picture of everything and what we do internationally. And one key part of that is really making sure that people add the required information or data to the system, and that's a continuous process, which means that we are clearly articulating to everyone what is the data missing in their projects, and what's the work to be done. So a lot of the dashboarding we do is actually to monitor whether people are adding the data to the system. Otherwise, we cannot make the analysis. So that's an important part I wanted to emphasize, and that's to some extent some of the reflections we make. And I think in terms of the value, then ultimately, as in Netherlands Red Cross, we have signed up to publish IATI, based on the IATI standard. It's been a bit of a push from our government on that subject as well. But here we are, we can automatically generate now these data sets from what we have generated. So, I mean, in that sense, there's no complex publication issues in that anymore. So it's bringing up efficiency there. But I think that's the last mile actually of the work then in that sense. But it also generates now the data that we need to share for federation-wide purposes. So for us, it's relatively simple actually to feed into sort of federation-wide reporting systems or accountability mechanisms. So that's now easier. But for operational purposes, it really starts with the whole data collection, and I like the curve as well on that. The value will always come later with this type of work. So that needs to be recognized as well by the organization with an investment that comes with it. So let me leave it there. Otherwise, I'm taking all the time.
Thank you, Jurian, for building on those insights. We also have Emma. Emma, we would love to see you if you can come off of video, but we'd love to have you expand a little bit more on your challenging experiences so far.
Hi. I'm quite new to the movements, and I work at the Norwegian Red Cross, and there's a lot of good work.
It's just a little bit low on your volume, Emma. Apologies for that.
Sure how to fix that. Let me try that, please.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, much better. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
No, just, I mean, I understand that for many, the end product is what's most exciting and interesting. And then I do find it quite challenging to try and shift the focus to also include the more data management side and ensuring sound data quality. There's an understanding, but maybe not the willingness to invest the time and resources needed to do something about it. And also related to that, I'm wondering how the organization, or how you are organized, how that contributes to this challenge. Because you can have you might have an IT data department, or you could have lots of ambassadors spread around. But what works best, kind of? So that was my question.
Karl, go ahead. Over to you. Raising your hand.
Sorry, I can't find the digital hand, so
That's okay. Thank you, Emma, for the question and expanding on it. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Emma. I started writing something in the chat, but this is good. Heather and in Solferino are working a lot together with us on leadership and how to manage digital transformation and how to get organized as well. So she's probably a good resource to have a chat to her about this. But I think one important thing to mention is that traditionally, sort of data has been managed by people that also manage IT, and they are not necessarily, that's not necessarily their focus, their drive. Data is often put in the IT department, and it's not always the best way to do it. We often see that having the data management and the organizing the data slightly separate works a bit better, and have it more connected up to the business owners, the people that are going to use that data, that know what data they need, where they need it, and the quality of that data for them to be able to make use of it is a good way to do it. And we often see that works a bit better. Yeah. Heather, do you want to say something about the sort of the management, how best to set your organization up? Or...
Sorry, can you say that again, please?
Yeah, I'm just Emma was asking about how to set the how to be optimally organized to ensure digital transformation, and you're working a lot on that, aren't you?
Yeah, you know, there's a whole team with the digital steering committee. A bunch of us are here, including Urian, and I think that's the first thing, is that you need to find allies, you know, and work with that. But I think you also need to figure out what your leaders are interested in, and then what your national society priorities are, right? So building out a strategy and a plan, it does take quite a lot of effort. I would say that Ian and I started working quite closely together about 4 years ago, and we only got a strategy last year. But having the strategy in place, but also thinking about how do you help your leaders embrace a digital transformation, I would say that we've just had the biggest exercise in that. By having this digital and data week, many volunteers and staff from around the world have come to learn with each other and share. And so this kind of exercise demonstrates that there's a real power in our network. And so how do we have shared leadership after that? I think that that would be really a priority. And I'm not sure if I addressed it, but that's kind of what I was hoping that we can talk about, because I think the management around, even just the basics around, do people understand what happens, what we lose without data management? I think that's something that's really critical. For example, if a national society, and I was in Tanzania a couple of years ago, and the data analysis officer, he said to me, if I could just have a proper data management system to have year-over-year data for flood resilience so that I could plan, that would make my life so much easier, because we want to be strategic in our work. And I think data management's about the practicalities, but we're a preparedness organization. So data management's about preparedness. And so finding ways to fund it and support it and to grow it, but also do all the different pipeline activities, I think is super important. So pardon me if I went on a touch of a tangent. I'm coffeeless, it seems. Over to George.
Thank you. There is about 3 minutes to go, so we can start to, thank you, Emma, for that question. That was really great. Appreciate that. We've got 3 minutes to go. Is there anyone else who has any other thoughts they want to share, comments on the topics, violent disagreements on what's being said here, anything anyone wants to share at all? Doesn't seem to be. So what I will do, thank you, Heather, for putting that into the chat. I was just going to mention there are some very interesting links that Michael has sent around learningtochange.org in the chat. Please have a look at those. We also are recording this event. So if you want to sit back, reflect, and then think about maybe a conversation and go back to that, that's something that we'll have captured, as well as all this documentation in the chat, because we know when the room closes and you don't get your links in time, you fear that you lose them forever, which won't be the case. And we can always discuss about copies of the presentation that Karl has taken us through, and any further comments for Michael. On that note, I think I'm just going to take a look here. Thank you, Heather. Yes, I think that's a great summary on this event and on digital transformation, that data management is certainly at the core, and it feels that the conversation was well revolved around that. So thank you, everyone. Before you go, I would love, if possible, everyone can come on camera, off of their, come on camera if possible. It's the best way to describe it. And just give us a bit of a wave. It's a whole week full of tons of great content and events. And we're not here in person, so we like to do this virtually if possible. Give everyone a wave. And there's some familiar faces I see in there from some previous sessions, and I hope I'll see you in some more this week. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks again, Karl and Michael and George. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
That was interesting. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Karl, if you want to stay on.
Oh yeah, Karl and Michael, if you want to stay on,
Yeah.
we can have a
Quick
quick
debrief. Roar, you're
quick
welcome to
debrief.
stay. Ian already left. Y'all are back to back.
Ian's out. I'm out.
Yeah,
I'm
no.
on to my next
Well,
thing.
It's lunch. It's lunch. All right. So we're just having a quick chat for folks here. Just so you know, just staff. Oh, Michael's added himself back
I'll
in.
bring him back in. Yeah, he
Yeah,
accidentally
I'm
left.
just gonna remove people who aren't staff. I hope that's okay.
Yeah. So long. We're going to bump you out. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Let's see if I can.
Michael's still there.
No.
I don't like this new pop-up that asks
I
me if I
know.
want to
don't-
report them.
I know. We don't want to report anybody. No.
No.
Just hit don't report.
Yeah, I do. I do.
Yeah, and so we don't want to report anyone. We would just want to. What happened? Oh boy.
Oh my God. And they leave the absolute
leave-
report.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I like. There's no one here that's impersonating anyone or private. It's just frozen. Oh, what is
Okay.
strange.
I know. I didn't realize when you remove people that it reports it to Zoom automatically. They have,
No,
that
the
little
box you can check it. It won't.
okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Jintari, how are you?
She's right here.
Is she? She's right here, right here.
It's like,
Carl, how'd that go for you? Michael, how'd that
she's
go
asking
for
how
you?
you are.
Yeah, I thought it was good. Yeah.
Yeah?
Interesting. Good questions as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Carl, how are you?
How'd you feel?
I think it was interesting. It was nice, and there was a reasonable number of people following as well. So that's always positive. Yeah.
We had 28 as was our peak, maybe
Yeah.
29.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not too bad.
And what I found is this whole event has been full of introverts. Pulling questions out of people has been like George and I both going to sessions and I literally I'm sorry if you know if I've met you and I know your name, I'm going to call on you, right? And so and Sean does the same thing too. We just walk into sessions, we're like, yes, we know you have something to say. So but in some cultures people need to be called on, right? And so it's hard because I just don't know a lot of the people because there's a lot of new people here. So the good news is that a lot of the people that weren't our staff I had never seen before, right? And all that I'm in day 3 of sessions and my growling stomach tells me it's the middle of the day. But yeah, just thanks, Karl. So we're still recording. Fuck.
Sorry, let me stop recording.